Good morning, ladies and germs. I do apologise for my attire, as I have had a thought, and rather than forget that thought while I'm getting suitably dressed, hair nice, and makeup put on so that I am suitable to be seen on video, I thought, you know what? Forget it. Bit of authenticity. I'm going to come on looking just like I do so that I don't remember, in other words, sorry, I don't forget the thought I had. It's to do with my great age, you see. Anyway, here's the thought I had. We are bombarded from television adverts, from junk mail through the letterbox, from billboards, you name it, about making a difference to this big global troubled world. Everything from helping damaged hedgehogs to feeding Yemen to Sudan to Middle East peace. But the thing is, I can't make that kind of difference. I can't put out all the California fires. I can't sort out the civil wars that are happening around the world. And nor can you. And this tends to make us feel kind of redundant. It makes us feel disappointed. It makes us feel awful. I mean, if we tried to save the entire planet and gave £2, as we're asked for, to every single cause in England, for instance, for around the world, I would be the one ending up sitting in a small corner of a part of Soho, dressed in rags with the old Starbucks cup in my hand, asking for change so that my life could be helped and so I could eat. We just can't make a huge change on a global level. Don't get me wrong, I do believe in the power of one. And one, and one, and one, and that together we can make a change. But what I'm talking about today is the sense of hopelessness, the sense of guilt, the sense of shame on some kind of subconscious level that we carry with us, that we're not donating to every animal charity, every poor donkey charity, every sex trafficking charity, every child blindness, you know what I mean? You know how it goes on and on and on and on and on. And we're made to feel like we're terrible people deep down, you know. And then when we go out and we buy a coffee and we have a cup and we have a piece of cake, and that's £5, say, we say to ourselves, that £5 could have fed a child for a week in Sudan. You know, we're very aware of the shame that we are somewhat privileged when actually we're not that privileged in the sense of normal privilege. We're just average. But yeah, compared to people suffering in this world, we are hugely privileged. So what do we do about the shame and the guilt that we carry? What do we do about trying to make a difference without becoming bankrupt ourselves? So I can remember as a teenager, because I am, of course, from the prehistoric age, that there was a time when I was a teenager when you had to lick a stamp in order to put it on an envelope and send the envelope off. Whether it was a get well card to Melton Mowbray, whether it was part of a petition to Washington, D.C., or whether it was a I no longer wish to be your girlfriend to somebody in Birmingham. Now, licking a stamp doesn't seem to make a big difference, but my DNA, once I'd licked that stamp, travelled to wherever that stamp was going, and whatever content was in the envelope made a difference to that person. I liked that idea. I liked sending cards to friends in Hawaii and thinking, gosh, I may not be in Hawaii, but my DNA is. It was a kind of travelling. But I digress. So in other words, licking a stamp made a difference, right? Very, very small, but made a difference. And before we had the internet and before we had satellite dishes, we didn't live in a global awareness. At the very least, we had newspapers. And I can remember as a child when Biafra was the country that was, the number one troubled place, and being told whenever I wouldn't eat my last pea on my dinner plate, to being told, now there's a child in Biafra that would love that pea. Come on, eat it. But before we had global awareness, we had the awareness only of the village we lived in. Joanna Lumley once said, one of my favourite people, by the way, that we were not designed to have enough compassion for the entire world. And that's why we carry shame and guilt about not healing the entire world. That in fact we were designed only to have enough compassion for the village we lived in way back when. So that the difference we could make at that time would be to cook a meal for a member of the village who was sick and couldn't feed her family, or to help somebody with getting the harvest in, or, the little things we did, babysitting for a mummy that wasn't very well, or whatever it was. The tiny little things we did, we didn't see as tiny. We saw them as huge because we were making a big difference to the life of the people in our village. Now, the world is still a village, but it's global. And we can't change it just by ourselves. We can contribute, but we can't change it. So we need to think about licking stamps. And what I mean by that is letting our DNA, letting who we are, make a difference to the village we live in. Now that village may be Twickenham in London. That village might be Compton in New York. That village might be Barcelona. Might be villages are no longer confined to small little hamlets with a pub and a post office and a church. But to think of the place where we live as part of one of the global villages, and that the differences that we make are as vital to the entire planet as they are to the little village we live in. I can remember one day being in a Tesco local, which to those of you across the world who have no idea what that is, that's a small supermarket. And the cashier looked completely bummed out. Poor girl, she's probably stood on her feet for 8 hours, saying the same things over and over and over. And so I could see this. And so I said to her, "Oh, darling, you must be so tired. How boring as well. How long have you got left on?" And she said, "Oh, I've only got half an hour and then I can go home and have a cup of tea." And I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." And I said, "And by the way, I love your brooch." She said, "Oh, thank you. It belonged to my mother." And suddenly this girl who was trying very hard to survive life in her difficult bit of the village met a member of the same village who licked a stamp. In other words, used her DNA in that small corner of the Tesco local to make a difference and cheer her up. Or, you know, in a village, if a mother was sick, we would cook a dinner so that her family could be fed. If a child was sick, we would help and rally round. If, I'm going back to villages I never lived in, if the harvest needed help bringing in, we brought it in. You know, we made differences. If we bumped into a little boy who'd just fallen off his tricycle, we would, you know, kiss his boo-boo better, kiss his wound better. And these were all seemingly tiny, tiny things that we did, but actually they were huge, and we felt better for having made a difference in the lives around us. So I suggest that each one of us think of the world in our corner as our village, as part of the global village, and realize that if we lick stamps in our village, if we are making little differences that actually turn out to be huge differences with knock-on effects, you know, that woman probably may have gone home from being a cashier at the Tesco local in a foul mood because she was bored to tears and worn out, and shouted at her kids or kicked her cat or thrown something at the wall. Whereas just maybe my licking the stamp and using my DNA to cheer her up meant she went home, made marvellous spaghetti bolognese, and hugged her husband and had a pleasant evening. Do you see? Differences don't have to be on a global scale in order to matter. And if each one of us can think about the area in which we live as a village, then the whole world is having differences made that matter by those that are local to it. I'm not saying don't send money to great, great causes around the world, and I do. But sometimes I still feel shame when another poor overloaded donkey is put on the television, and I think, well, I can't afford to save that donkey, you know, or a bear being kept in a small cage needing to be freed. Well, I'm sorry, I just can't afford to save that bear. And especially when I see a small child malnutritioned and, you know, all it would take would be another £2 to feed it for a day. I think, I can't do it. I'm already giving enough. I can't. But we can make a difference. We can lick our stamps right where we are. It was just a silly thought I had this morning, and I wanted to share it. And I wanted to put across to you the possibility that came into my head about living in little villages and licking stamps on our envelopes so that the entire world has a difference made to it by those who live in local areas. Tell me what you think. Have a good day.